In this module, we introduced Entity Framework Core. That's an ORM, or Object Relational Mapper. Object Relational Mapping is a technique that lets you query and manipulate data from a database using an object-oriented paradigm. Entity Framework Core is one of those object relational mappers. It's the preferred ORM to use for .NET. We created entity classes first. As we learned, the DTOs, or the outer-facing model, is different from the entities, or the entity model. Not all fields, like computed fields, are stored in a database. And the data we want to offer through an API is often shaped differently than how it's stored in the underlying data store. So it's important to make that distinction. We can rely on conventions or use annotations on those to define things like primary and foreign keys, required fields, and so on. Personally, I prefer being explicit because I believe it makes the code more readable. So I tend not to rely too much on conventions. Anyway, those are then registered as DB sets on the DB context. That context represents a session with the database, and it can be used to query and save instances of our entities. From that moment on, we could access our entities through LINQ. There was another important concept we looked into: migrations. Just as our code evolves, so does a database. New tables might be added after a while. Existing tables might be dropped or altered. Migrations allow us to provide code to change the database from one version to another. Then we looked into an option to seed the database, which means providing it with data to start with. We can do that through the hasData method when configuring the model. Don't forget to add a migration afterwards. And lastly, we got rid of our hard-coded connection string. We learned how to store it in the app settings file for the development environment, but used a safer storage option for the production environment, an environment variable. And that's it for this module. In the next module, we will tie everything we learned up until now nicely together. We will get rid of the in-memory data store and replace it with our persistent database